Click the bell icon to get latest videos from Ekeeda.
Hello friends, we'll be going through a specific sum whereby we'll be studying how to prepare a trial balance under the 3 method. This is just an example where we'll understand how totals method is followed, how balance method is followed, and how totals come balance method is followed under one specific question itself. So let's go ahead with that. So, as we know that we need to prepare a trial balance to understand the arithmetical accuracy of any specific ledger or journal entries, to help locate all the errors, and to prepare the financial statement, which is an error-free statement, so that all the policy-making decisions for external and internal users can be done without having any flaws in it. So, to prepare a specific trial balance, we'll be using 3 methods. One, that is the total balance method. Second will be balances method. Third will be total cum balances method. Wow, out of these 3 methods, we'll be using balances method, which is the most commonly used method. So, however, when we talk about preparing a trial balance, we'll take this example and we'll prepare all the 3 methods so that you are familiar with how each of this method goes and how simple they are when it comes to preparation of trial balance. Now, to understand, totals method is something where we have learned that the balance of the credit side and the debit side, that means the debit side total of the ledger, the credit side total of the ledger, excluding the balances, will be mentioned under the debit category and the credit category. Under the balances method, the balance either on the debit side or on the credit side will be mentioned in the trial balance according to the category of the asset or according to the category of the specific ledger that we are talking about. In the third method, whereas total cum balances method will be having 4 columns. One will be debit total, second will be credit total, third will be debit balance, and the fourth will be credit balance. Under this, there is a combination of both totals method and balances method, which you'll understand once we go ahead with the problem. So, totals method, balances method, and total cum balances method is something that we'll be studying about. Let's go ahead and understand the first problem that we have in this situation. Now, under this, we have 4 accounts which we have mentioned, or 4 ledger balances, what we have mentioned in the sum. Let's go ahead with the sum. Mrs. A ledger shows following accounts. Now we have to prepare the trial balance under the method of total method, under the method of balances, and under total cum balances method. The 4 accounts that we have are as follows: A's capital account, Rohan's account, machinery account, and Rahul's account. Now, A's capital account. As it is a capital account, it will always have a credit balance. Hence, the balance which has been carried down from the previous year will be mentioned on the credit side of the opening statement or the opening ledger. Here, the balance which has been brought down is rupees 40,000. As you can see, the question holds balance brought down, and I've marked it similarly as 1. That means the first balance that was brought down from the previous financial ledger or from the previous pre-answer book has been brought down here as the first balance, that is 40,000. The second transaction that we have under his ledger account is cash. We have cash balance of 20,000 under his capital. That means some cash has been brought by A and which has been credited to his capital amounting to rupees 20,000. So if you see, the total of credit side is rupees 60,000. Hence, the balance in his account on the debit side will be 60,000 again. This same balance will be carried forward in the next year. Hence, this balance carried forward, as I've mentioned here, will be brought down in the next year, which will be again 60,000. So if you see, there is a marking 1, 2 and 3 under the account, which states 1 being the balance which has been carried down or brought down as per the previous balance, the balance which you have found in the financial year, and the same balance being carried forward in the next year. Let's go on to the next account which says Rohan's account. Now Rohan here is a debtor. When it comes to a debtor, the opening balance will be on the debit side. Now we have Rohan's account here. Rohan's account is a debtor. Now when it comes to a debtor account, the opening balance will be on the credit side of the account. That means a debit balance. When it comes to a debit balance, that means debit side is more than the credit side. Hence credit side has balance and that is carried forward here. Hence when we talk about Rohan's account being a debtor account, we have the opening balance which has been marked here as 1. Rupees 10,000. Again, this specific account has certain transactions. Let's go through it. Purchases rupees 50,000. As you can see, it is rightly mentioned here 50,000 purchases. That means this transaction or this account has been credited with 50,000 purchases. Here, which has been mentioned. Second transaction, if you have mentioned in the account, cash rupees 40,000 is on the debit side. That means the total balance as per the account will be 20,000. So when we talk about 20,000, this balance will be carried forward as it is a debit balance. Hence, in the next year, it will be going on the credit side, which is the third marking, which we have mentioned here. Let's go on to the third account, which states machinery. Machinery being an asset will have a debit balance. Hence, a debit balance will be carried forward here. If you see the first marking balance brought down rupees 20,000. Second, we have depreciation for rupees 3,000 onto the account. Depreciation being an expense will be reduced from the balance of the machinery account. That's the reason we have a credit of 3,000 here. And the balance which is into the account is rupees 17,000, which is carried down, and the same will be carried forward in the next year. That is, balance brought down will be 17,000. The last account being Rahul's account, who is a creditor. Now, the credit balance or the debit balance into the account will be carried forward as per the category of the account. Hence, now that Rahul is a creditor, we have the first marking which has been mentioned here. Balance brought down 15,000. Now, the second transaction into his account, let's go through that. A sales has been made of rupees 60,000. Hence, it is seen on the debit side of the account. Let's go on to the third transaction. Cash transaction has been made into his account, which is worth rupees 55,000. Now, the only balance that is left into the account has been mentioned as the third marking. 20,000, which will be carried forward into the next year. Hence, the balance of 20,000, if you can see, has been mentioned here. So these are the 4 ledger accounts that we have. We'll be seeing how this specific ledger balance is created and then further classified into a trial balance under the 3 methods. Let's go ahead and see these transactions. Now, the first method that has been used is trial balance preparation as per the totals method. As we have already seen the question, and I suppose you must have noted down the question here, we'll straight away go ahead with the totals method. Under totals method, as I've clarified earlier, that the total of debit side and the credit side is always mentioned under the account while preparing trial balance statement. So let's go ahead with the first part where we have mentioned A's account. So A's account has a total of debit side rupees 0, as there was nothing mentioned in the debit side. However, the credit side of the account had a capital entry of 60,000. Hence, we have mentioned on the credit side rupees 60,000. Similarly, Rohan's account had 2 transactions in it. The debit side of the total being 40,000 and the credit side of the total being 60,000, as you can see in the sum. As we have mentioned, the balance into the account, that is the balance that has been brought down in the next year, will not be considered under the total. This is considered only under the balance method. Hence, when we talk about totals method, anything excluding the balance which has been carried forward or brought down in the next year will be excluded, and the balance which has been mentioned in the account, that is the balance brought down from the previous year, and the current year transactions will be only considered when we talk about debit balance total and credit balance total. Now, let's go on to the next account, which is machinery account. If we see that there was a balance brought down for 20,000 in the question, and there was a depreciation on the credit side worth rupees 3,000. So these are the two totals which have been mentioned as 20,000 on the debit side and 3,000 on the credit side. Similarly, we have the fourth account, which is Rahul's account. Now, if you see, there were transactions worth rupees 55,000 and 20,000 on the debit side, and a credit transaction of worth rupees 75,000. Let's go on to the next account, which says Rahul's account. As you can see in the Rahul's account, there was a transaction worth rupees 75,000 on the debit side and 55,000 on the credit side. So that is the transactions which have been mentioned on the debit side total and on the credit side total. Once you have mentioned all these totals under the debit side and the credit side, the last step of the transaction or preparation of financial statement or preparation of trial balance will be totaling the debit side and the credit side. These totals will tally. Now that we have only taken examples, hence I've crossed mark it and not totaled the complete account. Once you have the complete sum, you will be totaling the debit side and the credit side. We'll be matching the total of the debit side and the credit side. Now that I've taken only examples, hence we haven't totaled and we have just cross marked it. But once you have the complete question, whereby the debit and the credit sides have been completely given, the debit side will be totaled up and will be tallied with the credit side and the total should match. If it doesn't, that means there is certain error which we have skipped or we have missed out when we have prepared the trial balance or before preparation of trial balance, which will be either journal or will be ledger, which will be understanding in the next chapter when it comes to the rectification of errors. So these errors will be classified and will be rectified, and hence the trial balance will be error free. So this is how we prepare a trial balance with totals method. Now, when we talk about the same question under the following method, that is balances method, let's go and understand how we prepare trial balance under the same balances method. We'll be using the same question, we'll be having those four accounts itself, and we'll be using how a preparation of trial balance is done under the balances method. As I've already mentioned that under totals method, the total of debit side and the credit side, excluding the balance which has been carried forward for the next year, will be mentioned here. And now under the balances method, the balances which were carried forward in the next year will be something that we'll be mentioning under the balance method. So if you can see that under the four categories or the four accounts that we have mentioned, the first account states Ace Capital, which showed a credit balance of 60,000. So 60,000 credit balance has been already mentioned on the credit side of the trial balance. Now we have next account which says Rohan's account, which had again a credit balance of 20,000. Hence the credit side of the trial balance has been mentioned as 20,000. The next account that we have under this category is a machinery account. Machinery account, as we have mentioned, under this category has a debit balance of 17,000. Hence you can see 17,000 being mentioned on the debit side of the trial balance. Similarly, we have Rahul's account, which has a debit balance of 20,000, and you can see, as we have mentioned in the question, the same thing has been mentioned here. As you can see that all these balances have been mentioned, the balances as per the carried forward method. So in the ledger, when you have found out that the balance which has been carried forward, the same difference or the same balance has been mentioned here, that's when you classify that the trial balance has been method or has been prepared using the balances method, where only the balances which has been carried forward in the next year are mentioned according to the category of the assets or the liabilities or the incomes or the expenses that we are talking about. So any capital account, any asset account, any liability, any expense, income, and the balances as per their account will be mentioned under the balances method. Again, as this is just an example and not the whole question, we have only cross-marked the totals. However, in the question, when you have a complete answer with it, the account total will be matched. That means the debit side and the credit side of both these trial balance should be matching. If not, there is an error which you need to rectify either from the journal entries or from the ledger balances. It can either be a problem when it comes to totaling of the trial balance. So make sure that all the totals are matched and the debit side and the credit side comes to a common tally method. So this is how you prepare the balances method and the trial balance under the balance method. Now there is a third method that we have used, that means total cum balances method. Let's go ahead and see how we prepare trial balance under that method. We'll be using the same question, same examples. However, the format here changes a little bit. As I've said, that total cum balances method is a mixture of the first method that we have used and the second method that we have used. That is the total method and the balances method. So, when we talk about total cum balances method, we'll be having 4 columns in total for the amount section. One being debit total, second being credit total, third being debit balance, fourth being credit balance. Nothing has to be done here. We have to merge both the methods what we have used earlier. So under this category, what we'll be doing is the debit total and the credit total of the ledger account will be mentioned as per the totals method. And the debit or the credit balance, either of one as per the account, will be mentioned on either of the total sides. So for example, for A's account where we had 60,000 of credit total and the balance under the account was a credit total of 60,000 again. So if you can see, we have mentioned 60,000 under the credit side total method and 60,000 under the credit balance method. Similarly, if you see Rohan's account had a balance of 40,000 under the debit side and 60,000 under the credit side. We have already mentioned that here. The difference between them, that means the debit side being only 40,000 and the credit side being 60,000. A positive difference of 20,000 has been mentioned on the credit side here. This 20,000 will be the balance that has been carried forward or brought down in the next financial year, and that's the reason it has been mentioned on the credit side as per the question's requirement. Now, let's go on to the next account which says machinery account. When we talk about machinery account, we had certain balances there, 20,000 being on the debit side and 3,000 being as a part of depreciation on the credit side. If you can see, we have mentioned these totals here, and the balance, that is 20,000 minus 13,000, that is 17,000, has been mentioned on the debit side, because if 20,000 is the debit side total and 3,000 is the credit side total, the balance comes on the credit side, which is 17,000, that will be carried forward in the next year on the debit side, and hence that same balance has been mentioned on the debit side under this category. So Rahul's account, that is the next example, has a balance of 75,000 on the debit side and 55,000 on the credit side. So if the debit side is 75,000 and if the credit side is 55,000, there is a difference of 20,000 on the credit side. That same thing will be mentioned on the debit side in the next column or probably in the next financial year. So if you can see, there is 20,000 balance which has been mentioned here on the debit side. Hence, once you have the complete sum here, once you have recorded all the transactions on the total cum balance method, all the ledger postings have been done under the trial balance. That means the debit total of the account and the credit total of the account should match, and so as the debit balance of the account will match with the credit balance. Hence, we'll have certain amount which will be totaling up with debit balance and credit balance. And we'll have debit balance which will be matching up with the credit balance. If this doesn't happen, that means there is certain error that has happened either while preparation of journal entries, while preparation of ledger, or while totaling the account balances and mentioning them under trial balance. So you got to rectify which one of the error you have found out. Now when it comes to rectification, there is a separate chapter which we have for rectification of errors. We'll be understanding that in the next video. Now, when we talk about rectification of errors, once you have rectified the balances and the same has been mentioned in the trial balance, your debit balance and credit balance total should match, and so is the debit total and the credit total. So this is how you prepare the trial balances under the three methods: total method, balances method, and total cum balances method. So once you are able to figure out which method is the easiest for you, you can opt either of it. However, if the question demands for any specific method, you should be able to prepare that specific trial balance under that method. As you have seen, all these three methods are quite easy to understand and quite legitimate to make sure that there is no flaw while preparation of trial balance. One of the most important key while preparation of the trial balance is to ensure that there is no totaling error and the balances have been carried forward as per the requirement of the account. Make sure you make no mistakes while carry forwarding the balances and while mentioning the balances under trial balance, as any error here will prepare the financial statements in an errorless way. If you have errors while preparation of trial balance, there will be errors while preparing profit and loss statement and balance sheet. So if your trial balance is error free, so will be the profit and loss account and balance sheet here. This is what we wanted to talk about when it comes to preparation of trial balance: the specimens, the meaning, the definition, and how a specific trial balance is prepared under the three methods. This is what we'll talk about, and that's for the day. Thank you for watching Ekeeda. Keep subscribing and stay tuned to Ekeeda.